Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is. My name is Divine Fu. I am based at the University of Cape Town, where I head the anthropology department and also director for the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town. I like to say I'm a social anthropologist, even though I have a very big interdisciplinary background. So I'm very happy and pleased to be part of this workshop or conference and to make a contribution to a group of friends, the IMTFI, the University of Irvine, very important friends of mine, Jenny, Bill, and your team. And thank you, Vivian, for reaching out, and Agnesia, and also all the team who are working on this cash in crisis initiative and project. I'm sorry that I cannot be there with you. There are lots of limits to our love and friendship for our friends and family. Bill knows quite well because he has not made it to the continent, has not made it to my own home here or in Cameroon. So I can be forgiven for not being there. But thank you to Mamadou Diawara and also to MIASA, my big brother, for hosting this set of debates that are really important for the future of the continent and also for the future of the world. So my talk or my contribution comes from old work and current work. And some of you may have heard this before, but I've entitled it the original sin of FINTech. But it comes from really my reflections around technology and also around artificial intelligence here at Huma on a project which we entitled AI and the Ethics of Care. It's born out of the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the push from Klaus Schwab and also the World Economic Forum that the future is a future of an industrial revolution called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is a revolution around technology, but also around data and algorithms that are born out of technology and data. But also what emerges out of it specifically as artificial intelligence, however you conceive of it, because it's a very big, wide field. It's a dark hole. It's a vortex. It draws you in, and then you begin to see so many different dimensions. But quite often, many of us who experience artificial intelligence are often through mediums which mediate it or which use it to operate as robotics. So every time some of us talk about artificial intelligence, it's really around robotics. But my reflection, which is on the original sin of tech and the original sin of FinTech, is really pushing us to think about the archaeology of this technology, which we now see and treat as emancipatory. The work that we did with the IMTFI is to really focus on the ways in which technology was revolutionizing money and financial transactions, and the ways in which it was helping to uplift poverty, the way in which it was contributing to flourishing, the way in which it was contributing to really responding to many of the emancipatory projects that activists and people across the world were seeking to push for. So that's gender, that is sexual identity or sexual orientation, that is knowledge, particularly what Foucault calls subjugated knowledges. That is people from the margins, whether it's identity, people in conflict, and people who are locating in places where they want to topple systems that have oppressed them for so long. So I deploy it in this context to really ask serious questions about this technology, which we treat as a kind of technology that will emancipate developing societies or people in the South. And here I'm talking about financial technologies, or technologies that have come to facilitate transactions what we called we can call the FINTech, which is a whole set of things. And I'm building on decolonial work, which asks us to really look at the coloniality of knowledge and the coloniality of power, which drawing on South American scholars like Mignolo, Maldonado, Torres, Quinoa, and others, and also anti-colonial scholars, particularly on the African continent, whether we're looking at Senghor, whether we are looking at Modimbe, or Yeronke, or Mamadou Diawara himself, Elisio Mankamo, Francis Nyamjo, many others who have really asked us to look at the DNA of knowledge, at the DNA of systems, to study the archaeology, because as Sabelo Gatsheni or Sabelo Ndlovu tells us, in rearticulating this critique about the power of what is called Eurocentric knowledge in the sense of the ways in which Europe imposes its knowledge systems, its epistemologies, its forms through violence. So that's very important when we talk about Eurocentric knowledge, which is global Europe, which includes every place that Europe has imposed itself, including us. That when we talk about Eurocentric knowledge, it's not necessary that it comes from Europe, but it is just the capacity of Europe to impose this as the one and only form, which it calls universal instead of pluriversal. So in this critique, they are really pushing us to look at the archaeology of it, at the DNA. So I deploy it here to ask us to look at, to examine the DNA, the source of financial technology, the source of tech, the source of fintech, the source of all of these revolutionary technologies that are facilitating cash transactions. And I argue that all of these have been afflicted by an original sin. And this original sin is actually the history and the origins of this technology, and that it should take us as far back as the Industrial Revolution, and trying to understand the birthplace of industry, of mass production, and the ways in which technology inserts itself into a humanity and a particular kind of technology which is coming to push industry, an industry whose role and job is to exploit, whose role and job is to create, to do mass production. It's not necessarily to improve life as we may see, but really to sell, really to make profits, because we are creating a new industrial complex that is mirroring the industrial complex that we see. And this industrial complex is actually cash, is actually finance, that is profits, that is actually being accumulated on the side. And I'm arguing that the source of what we call technological revolutions today is coming out of that place. So once we deploy the concepts such as entrepreneurship, once we deploy concepts such as innovation, once we deploy concepts such as startups, we are talking about particular forms of creation that are necessarily supposed to lead to profit. So the aspiration is to get to the stock exchange, is to get to the stock market. The aspiration is to mirror some of the models that we see today as a success. And when we look at the world globally and see who the billionaires are, you can look at that top list of billionaires. They are all people who are in the tech space, and I'm arguing with the original sin of tech, and here looking at the archaeology of this technology, of this financial technology, at the archaeology of AI, at the archaeology of these new revolutionary money transactions, that it comes from a dark place, from a dark hole. And one of those dark places is toxic masculinities. It's a particular kind of masculinity which comes out of garages. So if you look at the history of all these companies, whether it's Microsoft, whether you're looking at whether it's Virgin, whether it's Amazon and all of these places, they grow out of garages, you know, they grow out of dark spaces, they go out of places where there are no ethics. So the idea is that these transactions already come without ethics, and therefore that's what I call the original sin, that it is a technology that is not meant to be ethical. And this original sin is really on the conceptual basis of this technology. And here I'm really building on Mamadou Diawara and Eliseo Macamos' push to find scientific conceptual vocabularies to render our experiences intelligible, because these experiences cannot be read. They're coded in ways that are not always read, and that are not always discernible, and that are not always explained or explicable through other particular tools. So these cache technologies, which come from innovation, come from entrepreneurs, which come from particular kinds of men, you know, who are also coming from dark places. And this, I mean, not to have anything against these men, but just to say that masculinity and patriarchy are already problematic with misogyny, and it can even be deeper, you know, and in particular ways, and that it is the death of these particular kinds of masculinities that have led to the birth of this technology. But the other sin, which is even deeper, is the scientific or philosophical basis of this technology. And here I'm talking about these new technologies such as artificial intelligence, or technologies that depend on data, and technologies that are based on a particular framing of personhood. And here is the Cartesian logic, the Cartesian personhood, which is a kind of a personhood which is seen to be stable, which is seen to be whole, and which is seen to be predictable, because this is how this new technology works and functions. It is on predictability. It is on data that pre-exists, that's collected. It's even when we talk about generative AI, it is based on existing information. And when we say it is imitating the human, it is actually working on a particular logic and a particular framing of the human that is frozen. So when we take this technology into places such as Ghana, such as Cameroon, such as the DRC, or lots of different places, Indonesia and the others, that do not subscribe to this kind of predictable logic, that is the other sin. And that was what I call the thesis of customary surprises, which is this thing in Europe where you go to a person's birthday and you have to give them what they like. So you cannot give them another as a surprise. You spend so much time giving them what they like, and they say, oh, what a surprise. But the surprise is already something they know. And that is the problem of this technology, that it is used to customary surprises, to predictability. So while places like Africa actually offers us the opportunity to think about a futuristic technology that does not subscribe to this kind of predictable logics, what we are celebrating now as emancipatory actually freezes people, because it freezes them to a monochrome logic. And that's what I called the original sin. So unless we are able to deepen this archaeology and to understand this DNA, to do this kind of forensic analysis of these technologies, I think that we are actually still entrapped in this concept that you have called cash in crisis. I think that is where the crisis is. I think cash itself is not in crisis. That's an interesting logic, or an interesting concept. I think that it is our ability to be able to think beyond the logics that we are bringing from from outside. And that is what Mudimbe calls the colonial library. And that colonial library is really our challenge. So the colonial library of concepts, the colonial library of technology, the colonial library of ideas, the colonial library of what we call emancipation, the colonial library of having this tendency to always bring something to adapt. Even when we say it comes from the continent, it is still embedded within that library. So my push is that we rethink this technology, we rethink this idea of cash technology, this idea of these technologies as emancipatory, as resolving, because for me, that is where the crisis is. It is in the ideas, it's in the concepts that underpin it. Thank you.